The offering was where you went when the world had decided you were poison. And as Revna stood among the veiled women whose touch was considered cursed, whose presence was deemed deadly, she understood one truth with perfect clarity. No one would choose her. No one ever had. A heavy shroud concealed her completely, black fabric falling past her shoulders, obscuring every feature. Not because her face was monstrous, but because she was veilborn, and to look upon a veilborn directly was to invite death into your home. At least, that was what everyone believed. Her mother had died giving her life. Her nursemaid had wasted away within a year. Her betrothed, Corvin, along with his entire family, had succumbed to plague 3 weeks before their wedding. Everyone who had ever loved Revna had died, so the whispers weren't wrong. She was death wearing a woman's shape. The great hall of Valdron held no celebration tonight. It held an offering, where tainted women were given to powerful men who cared nothing for reputation, only for warm bodies to fill cold beds and produce heirs. Then the Shadow Warlord arrived, Varek of the Northern Reach, commander of the Hollow Legion, a man whose very name made generals retreat and kings negotiate. Rumor said he wasn't fully human anymore, that shadows moved beneath his skin, that his heart had turned to ice years ago. He walked past noblewomen and merchant daughters without a glance, and stopped directly in front of Revna. "This one," he said. The hall went silent. His terms were simple. He would marry her, protect her, give her everything she needed. He would never touch her, never share her bed beyond what was necessary to produce an heir, and he would never, under any circumstance, love her. Neither of them understood how impossible that vow would be. The council chamber of the Northern Reach was carved from black stone. Revna had never seen architecture like it. The walls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the torches burning in their sconces gave the room an eerie, flickering quality, as if the shadows themselves were alive and watching. She stood near the great table, her shroud still in place, though Varek had given her permission to remove it. Old habits were difficult to break. A lifetime of hiding didn't disappear in a single night. The contract signing was meant to be simple. Varek's advisors had reviewed the terms. Her father had been summoned as her legal representative, a formality that made Revna's stomach turn. Lord Aldrich Thornwood stood across the table, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight. He hadn't looked at her directly since arriving. He never looked at her directly. To him, she had stopped being his daughter years ago. She was merely a problem to be solved. Beside him, Odette sat with her hands folded in her lap, her expression carefully blank. But Revna caught the sidelong glances her sister kept stealing toward Varek. Curiosity, fear, perhaps something else. "The terms are unusual," one of Varek's advisors murmured. He was an older man with kind eyes and a worried expression. "My lord, the stipulation that you will never look upon your wife seems extreme." "The stipulation protects everyone," Varek said flatly, "including Lady Revna. But surely, for the sake of heirs, that will be handled appropriately." Varek's tone made it clear the discussion was over. "Continue with the reading." The advisor cleared his throat. "Very well. Article 1. The marriage between Lord Varek of the Northern Reach and Lady Revna Thornwood shall be binding and permanent, recognizing Lady Revna as full mistress of all Northern Reach holdings and—" "Wait." Lord Aldrich stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Before this goes further, the council should know exactly what they're agreeing to." Revna's blood went cold. "Father," she began, "she's veilborn." Lord Aldrich's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Whatever my daughter has told you, whatever she has concealed, you must understand what that means. People die around her. People who care for her die. Is the Northern Reach prepared to lose servants? Advisors? Perhaps even your lord himself?" Silence crashed over the room. Revna felt every eye turn toward her. The weight of their stares pressed against her shroud like physical hands. "Lord Thornwood." Varek's voice was quiet, but something in it made Revna's skin prickle. "I was not addressing you." Her father blinked. "I'm her legal guardian, her representative. I have every right to—" "You have the right to witness the signing and nothing more." Varric rose from his seat. He wasn't particularly tall, but something about the way he moved made him seem to fill the entire room. "Your daughter's condition was disclosed to me before I made my selection. I am fully aware of what she is, and I chose her anyway." "Then you're a fool." The temperature in the chamber dropped. Actually dropped. Revna could see her breath misting in the air. "Father, please," Odette whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "You shouldn't." "I should absolutely." Lord Aldrich pointed a shaking finger at Revna. "That creature killed my wife, killed her betrothed and his entire family, killed the only match that could have saved our family's reputation. And now she's tricked her way into becoming Lady of the Northern Reach? I won't allow it." "You won't allow it." Varric's voice had gone terribly soft. "You speak as if you have a choice in this matter, Lord Thornwood. You don't. She's my daughter, my property until she's legally wed. I can withdraw her from this arrangement and— And do what? Sell her to the Silent Sisters?" Varric smiled, and it was the coldest expression Revna had ever seen. "I've heard the rumors, Lord Thornwood, about how eager you've been to dispose of your daughter, about the relief on your face when no one at the offering would take her." Lord Aldrich's face went white. "I wonder," Varric continued, still in that soft, dangerous voice, "what the court would think if they knew how the great Lord Thornwood treats his own blood. If they knew about the years of isolation, the systematic stripping of her education, her connections, her hope." "How do you know?" "I know everything that happens in my sphere of influence." Varric's pale eyes fixed on Lord Aldrich with predatory intensity. "And your daughter is now in my sphere, whether you like it or not." The advisor cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should continue with the contract, my lord?" Varric didn't move, didn't blink. Then, slowly, he sat back down. "Continue." The advisor rushed through the remaining articles: property rights, household management, expectations for public appearances, provisions for potential children. Revna listened with half an ear, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. "He defended me," she thought dazedly. "No one has ever defended me." "The final article," the advisor announced, "regarding the matter of physical intimacy." Revna tensed. "The parties agree that physical relations shall occur only as necessary for the production of heirs. Lord Varric shall wear a blindfold during all such encounters to protect himself from the veil-born curse. Lady Revna shall be permitted to remain veiled if she chooses. Neither party shall be required to provide affection, comfort, or emotional support beyond basic courtesy." In other words, Revna thought, they would be strangers who occasionally shared a bed. It should have been devastating. Instead, it felt like a gift. "Is this agreeable to both parties?" the advisor asked. "Yes," Varric said. "Yes," Revna said. Lord Aldrich made a strangled sound of protest, but Odette pulled him back before he could speak again. "Then please sign here." Revna's hand trembled as she took the quill. She signed her name in the careful script her mother's old nursemaid had taught her before she died. Before Revna killed her, supposedly, just by existing. Varric signed beside her. His handwriting was sharp and angular, like everything else about him. "It's done," the advisor announced. "May the gods bless this union." No one in the room believed they would. As Revna rose from her seat, her father caught her arm. His grip was painful through the layers of her shroud. "You think you've won something," he hissed. "You think this warlord will protect you. But he's hiding something, Revna. Something worse than what you are." "Father, let her go," Odette pleaded. "He's using you. And when he's done, when you've served your purpose, he'll dispose of you just like I tried to." Lord Aldrich's eyes blazed with hatred. You'll come crawling back. You'll beg for the Silent Sisters when you see what he truly is. Varrick's voice cut through like ice. Remove your hand from my wife, Lord Thornwood, or I will remove it for you. Lord Aldrich released her as if burned. Revna didn't look back as she walked out of the chamber. She didn't look at her father's fury or her sister's pity or the advisor's concern. She looked only forward, toward whatever future awaited her in this cold, shadowed keep. Cold over cruelty, she reminded herself. I'll choose cold over cruelty every time. But her father's words echoed in her mind long after she'd left him behind. He's hiding something worse than what you are. For the first time, Revna wondered what secret the Shadow Warlord carried in his frozen heart. The women stood in a row like candles waiting to be snuffed. Revna counted 7 of them, herself included. 7 souls deemed too dangerous, too broken, too tainted for proper marriages. The great hall of Valdron Castle had witnessed coronations and treaty signings, but tonight it witnessed something far grimmer, an offering. This was where the cursed came when all other paths had closed. Women touched by dark omens, born under shadow moons, or simply unlucky enough to have survived while everyone around them perished. Society couldn't execute them outright, not without proof of actual witchcraft. But society could certainly make them disappear into marriages that were prisons by another name. The crowd that had gathered was smaller than Revna expected. Merchants and minor lords, mostly. Men seeking servants they could call wives. Men who wanted bodies without complications, heirs without love. None sought affection. That would defeat the purpose. A woman to Revna's left trembled visibly, her thin veil doing little to hide the burn scars that marked her as a fire survivor, a flame-touched woman believed to carry destruction wherever she went. Another stood perfectly still, her hands bound in silk wrappings because her touch had allegedly withered crops in 3 villages. And then there was Revna. Her shroud was the heaviest of all. Black wool that fell to her wrists and past her chin, a hood that created a cave of darkness around her features. Veilborn didn't just hide their faces, they hid everything. To show skin was to risk someone seeing, and seeing led to attachment, and attachment led to death. At least, that was what her father had drilled into her for 23 years. The Thornwood girl, someone whispered in the crowd. The one who killed her own betrothed. Killed the whole family, I heard. Plague took them all 3 weeks before the wedding. Her mother, too. Died in childbirth, they say. The babe came out, and the mother stopped breathing. Veilborn are abominations. They should be drowned at birth. Revna kept her head bowed. She'd heard worse. She'd heard it from her own father. Lord Aldrich Thornwood stood near the eastern wall, pretending not to know her. His silver hair was impeccable, his noble bearing unchanged despite the scandal his cursed daughter had brought upon their house. Beside him, Revna's younger sister Odette clutched their father's arm, her face pale with barely concealed disgust. This was their solution. Offer Revna at the Valdron gathering and let some desperate lord take the problem off their hands. If no one chose her, well, then she could be sent to the Silent Sisters, locked away in a mountain convent where she could hurt no one else. That was the hope, anyway. That was what her father wanted. The auctioneer, a thin man with spectacles and a reedy voice, worked his way down the line with clinical detachment. Flame-touched, suitable for households requiring no hearthwork. Strong constitution, proven fertility through previous examination. The scarred woman was led away by a merchant who looked at her the way one might examine livestock. Crop blight carrier, hands permanently wrapped, recommended for indoor domestic service only. The woman with bound hands went to a minor lord from the eastern provinces. One by one, the cursed women found their buyers. One by one, Revna remained. The auctioneer hesitated when he reached her. Everyone hesitated when they reached Revna. Valeborn, he announced, his voice dropping slightly. Thornwood bloodline. 6 confirmed deaths within her sphere of attachment. Mother, nursemaid, betrothed, and his entire family. She cannot be looked upon directly. She cannot be touched without protective measures. She is offered for consideration. No one moved. Valeborn are poor investments, a merchant muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. They don't just kill through attachment, they drain entire households. I knew a man who bought one, thinking he was clever, dead within 2 years. Everyone in that manor, dead. It's not worth the risk, another agreed. Even for breeding purposes. What if the curse passes to the children? The whispers swirled around Revna like water around a drowning woman. She should feel something, she thought distantly. Shame, perhaps. Fear. But she'd spent so many years being told she was poison that the words had lost their sting. Now they were simply facts, like the color of the sky or the chill of winter. Her father would send her to the Silent Sisters. She would spend the rest of her life in a stone cell, praying to gods who had cursed her at birth. Perhaps that was fitting. The auctioneer opened his mouth to move on, to declare her unoffered and unaccepted, when the great doors of the hall slammed open. Every head turned. Every conversation died. The presence that rolled through those doors was unlike anything Revna had ever felt. It wasn't just dominance or authority. It was something older, something that made the torches on the walls flicker and the shadows in the corners seem to deepen. The Shadow Warlord, someone gasped. Gods above. What is he doing here? Varric of the Northern Reach walked into the hall as if he owned it. Perhaps he did. His territory bordered Valdron, and his military strength had kept 3 kingdoms from invading for the past decade. He was, by all accounts, the most powerful unmarried lord in the realm. He was also, by all accounts, something other than fully human. Revna couldn't see his face clearly through her shroud, but she could make out the broad shoulders beneath his black military coat, the way the crowd parted before him like water before a blade. His hair was dark, falling past his collar, and even from this distance she could sense the cold radiating from him. Not cold like winter. Cold like absence, like something vital had been removed, and only emptiness remained. He walked toward the platform where the remaining women stood. His boots made no sound on the stone floor, which should have been impossible. A man that size should make noise. But he moved like shadow itself, silent and inevitable. The auctioneer stammered a greeting. My Lord Varric, we are honored by your presence. If you seek a companion, we have several suitable candidates who might... Quiet. One word. That was all it took. The auctioneer's mouth snapped shut so fast his teeth clicked. Varric's gaze swept over the platform. Revna felt it pass over her like a physical touch, cold and assessing. For a moment she was certain he would move on. What warlord would want a Valeborn? What man with any sense would invite death into his household? His footsteps resumed. 1 step, 2, 3. They stopped directly in front of her. Revna's breath caught in her throat. Up close, even through the layers of her shroud, she could see him more clearly, the sharp planes of his face. The eyes that weren't quite the right color, too pale, almost silver, like moonlight on snow. The way shadows seemed to cling to his shoulders as if reluctant to let him go. This one, he said. Chaos erupted. The private chamber was smaller than Revna expected. She had imagined being brought before the warlord in some grand throne room, surrounded by guards and advisors. Instead, a servant had led her through winding corridors to what appeared to be a study. Books lined the walls. A fire burned in the hearth despite the warmth of the season. Maps covered a heavy wooden desk, and Varric stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the darkening sky. Leave us, he said to the servant. The door closed with a soft click. They were alone. Revna's hands trembled beneath her shroud. She clasped them together, willing herself to be still. She had prepared for many outcomes tonight. Being chosen by the Shadow Warlord was not among them. "You may sit," he said, without turning. There was a chair near the desk. Revna lowered herself into it carefully, keeping her movements controlled. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. He had chosen her. The contract was as good as signed. Finally, he turned. The firelight caught his features, and Revna had to suppress a gasp. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp edges and dangerous precision. But there was something wrong with him, something she couldn't quite name. His skin was too pale. The shadows beneath his eyes were too deep. And that coldness she had sensed from across the hall was even stronger now, a chill that seemed to emanate from his very bones. "You're Valeborn," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, my lord." "You've killed how many? Through your condition?" Revna flinched beneath her shroud. "6 confirmed. My mother at my birth. My nursemaid Hannah when I was 6. My betrothed Corvin and his father a year ago. His mother and sister followed within the month." "And you believe you caused their deaths?" The question surprised her. Most people didn't ask what she believed. They simply assumed. I don't know what I believe, my lord, but the pattern is undeniable. Those who grow close to me die. Those who love me die faster." Varric studied her for a long moment. His pale eyes revealed nothing. "Remove your hood," he said. Revna's heart slammed against her ribs. "My lord, I cannot. It would be dangerous for you to look upon me directly. The curse? I'm aware of the superstitions surrounding Valeborn." He crossed the room toward her, his footsteps still impossibly silent. "I'm also aware that most of those superstitions are precisely that, superstitions." "My lord, with respect, the deaths were real." He stopped a few feet from her chair. This close, she could see that his eyes weren't just pale. They had no warmth in them at all, like looking at ice over deep water. "I'm not asking you to remove your hood because I doubt your curse," he said quietly. "I'm asking because I don't care about it." Revna stared at him through her shroud. "You don't care?" "No." He turned away, walking back toward the window. "I chose you precisely because of your condition, not despite it. Do you understand?" "No, my lord, I don't understand at all." For a long moment he was silent. When he spoke again, his voice was flat. "You believe your presence brings death to those who love you. That makes you ideal for my purposes." He turned his head slightly, just enough for her to see his profile. "I will never love you. I am incapable of it. Therefore, your curse is meaningless to me." Something cold settled in Revna's chest. Not disappointment exactly. She hadn't expected love. She hadn't expected anything except servitude and suffering. But hearing him state it so plainly, so matter-of-factly, "The marriage will be contractual only," he continued. "You will have your own chambers, your own servants, and your own routine. We will interact when necessary, at formal functions and for the production of heirs. Beyond that, I want nothing to do with you." "You want nothing to do with me," Revna repeated slowly. "Is that a problem?" She almost laughed. A problem? He was offering her everything she had never dared hope for. A home, safety, a husband who would never grow close enough to die. "No, my lord, it's not a problem." He nodded as if her acceptance was always assured. "There are conditions." "Of course." "You will not ask about my past. You will not inquire about my condition. You will not attempt to understand me or know me beyond what is absolutely necessary." His voice hardened slightly. "And you will never, under any circumstance, attempt to make me care for you. Do you understand?" Revna understood more than he realized. He was hiding something. something that made him as dangerous to love as she was. "I understand, my lord." "Good." He picked up a document from the desk and extended it toward her. "Sign this, and you will become Lady of the Northern Reach. You will want for nothing. You will be protected from anyone who would harm you, including your father. And you will never have to hide behind that shroud again, if you choose." Revna's hand shook as she took the contract. "You would allow me to show my face?" "In my territory, you may do as you please. I have no interest in looking at you, but I also have no interest in controlling your appearance." Cold over control, she thought suddenly. That was what he was offering. Not warmth, not love, but freedom from hatred, freedom from fear, freedom from the constant expectation of rejection. Her father would have sold her to the Silent Sisters. This man was offering her a kingdom. "I accept your terms, my lord." Something flickered in his pale eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. "You accept," he repeated, "without negotiation, without questions." "What questions would change anything?" Revna asked quietly. "You offer protection and indifference. That is more than I have ever received. More than I ever expected." For a long moment, Varric simply looked at her. Then he turned away, returning his gaze to the window. "The ceremony will be in 3 days. My steward will see to your accommodations until then." He did not say goodbye. He did not offer his hand or any gesture of welcome. But as Revna was led from the room, contract clutched in her trembling fingers, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Fragile and dangerous and almost certainly foolish. But hope, nonetheless. The cathedral of the Northern Reach was nothing like the sun-drenched temples of Revna's homeland. Here, the windows were narrow slits that let in only slivers of gray light. The walls were the same black stone as Varric's keep, and the shadows pooled in the corners like living things. Even the altar was carved from obsidian, its surface reflecting the flickering candles like dark water. Revna walked the long aisle alone. No father to give her away. That tradition required the father to actually want the marriage to succeed. Lord Aldrich had departed the Northern Reach the morning after the contract signing, his parting words to Revna a hissed promise that she would regret this. Odette had stayed. That surprised Revna more than anything. Her sister sat in the front pew now, her face pale but present. They hadn't spoken since the contract signing, but she was here. That meant something. Revna wasn't sure what. The pews were filled with Varric's people. Northern lords and ladies in dark clothing, their expressions guarded. Military commanders who had served under him for years. Servants and common folk who had been granted permission to witness their lord's wedding. All of them watched her approach with undisguised curiosity. "She's still veiled," someone whispered. "Will he demand she remove it?" He's never cared about appearances. Perhaps he truly doesn't want to see her. Or perhaps he already knows what she looks like. Perhaps it's worse than we imagined. Revna kept her gaze fixed forward. Through the layers of her shroud, she could see Varric waiting at the altar. He wore black, as always, but today his coat was trimmed with silver thread that caught the candlelight. His dark hair was pulled back from his face, revealing the sharp lines of his features. He looked cold, untouchable, exactly like a man who had promised never to love her. But as she drew closer, she noticed something else. His hands, clasped behind his back, were trembling slightly, so slightly that no one else would see. But Revna had spent her life watching people from behind her veil, reading what they tried to hide. He's nervous, she realized, or afraid. But of what? The priest began the ceremony. His voice echoed through the cathedral, words about duty and honor and the sacred bonds of marriage. Nothing about love. That word was carefully absent from northern wedding rites, Revna had learned. Up here, marriages were alliances, contracts, strategic arrangements. Love was a weakness. Love got people killed. How fitting for them both. Lord Varric of the Northern Reach, the priest intoned. Do you take this woman as your wife, your lady, your bound partner in all matters of household and heir? I do. Varric's voice was steady, cold. Lady Revna Thornwood, do you take this man as your husband, your lord, your bound partner in all matters of household and heir? I do. Her own voice surprised her. It didn't shake. The priest nodded. The rings, then. Varric turned to face her fully. Even through her shroud, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. Not curious, not warm, but present. As if he was actually seeing her for the first time. He took her hand. Revna gasped. Not from fear, from cold. His skin was like ice. Not cool the way some people ran cool. Actually, genuinely cold, as if he'd been standing in a blizzard without gloves. The chill seeped through her shroud's thin fabric, biting into her fingers. My lord, she whispered without thinking. You're freezing. Something flickered in his pale eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or something darker. I run cold, he said quietly. It's part of my condition. Before she could respond, he slid the ring onto her finger. The metal was warm, she realized. He must have been holding it close to his body to warm it for her. A small consideration. A tiny kindness. It meant more than it should have. She fumbled with his ring, her hands clumsy beneath her shroud. When she finally slid it onto his finger, she let her touch linger for just a moment, trying to share whatever warmth she had. His eyes widened slightly, the trembling in his hands stopped. By the authority of the northern gods, the priest announced, I declare you bound, husband and wife, lord and lady. He paused, then added with obvious reluctance, You may kiss your bride, my lord. The cathedral went silent. Revna's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Would he lift her veil? Would they finally see the Veilborn's face? Varric stepped closer, close enough that she could smell him. Pine and steel and something else. Something that reminded her of winter nights and distant stars. Do you want me to look at you? He asked, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. No, Revna breathed. Then, because honesty felt important. But you should. You're my husband now. You have the right. I have many rights, he said. That doesn't mean I choose to exercise them. Before she could respond, he lifted her hand to his lips. The kiss was brief, formal. His mouth pressed against her knuckles for barely a heartbeat. But his lips were warm. Warmer than his hands. Warmer than she'd expected. And the tenderness of the gesture, the choice to honor her wishes when he could have demanded anything, made her eyes sting with tears she was grateful no one could see. Thank you, she whispered. He released her hand and turned to face the congregation. His expression was the same cold mask as always. But Revna had seen the warmth in that kiss. She'd felt it. And she knew, with sudden, terrible certainty, that she was in danger of wanting more. The bridal chamber was warm. That was the first thing Revna noticed. A fire roared in the hearth, built high enough to heat the entire room. Extra blankets had been piled on the bed. Even the stones beneath her feet seemed to radiate warmth, as if the floor itself had been heated. The servants prepared this, she murmured to herself. No, not the servants. Varric had ordered this. He'd known she would be cold, nervous, and vulnerable, and he'd tried to make it easier. The thought made her chest ache. She sat on the edge of the bed, her shroud still in place, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The blind maids he'd assigned to her had prepared her for the evening. They'd bathed her in water scented with lavender, brushed her hair until it gleamed, dressed her in a nightgown of soft white silk. Then they'd left her alone to wait. The knock came precisely at the hour he'd specified. Enter, Revna said, her voice steadier than she felt. Varric stepped inside. He'd changed from his formal wedding clothes into simpler attire, a loose white shirt and dark trousers. Without the military coat and silver trim, he looked less like a warlord and more like a man. A beautiful, terrifying, impossibly cold man. He closed the door behind him. The click echoed in the quiet room. "You're still veiled," he observed. Force of habit. He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "I won't ask you to remove it." "I know." She paused, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the ceremony. "Your hands were so cold at the altar, but your lips were warm. How is that possible?" Varric went very still. "My condition is complicated," he said finally. "Parts of me run colder than others." "What parts?" "The parts closest to the surface." He moved further into the room, stopping near the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across his features. "My hands. My skin. The cold comes from within and works its way outward." Revna processed this. "So deep inside, you're still warm?" "Deep inside, I'm dying." The words were flat. Words were matter of fact. "But yes, there's still warmth left. For now." She wanted to ask more. About his condition, about what was killing him, about whether there was any cure. But he'd made her promise not to ask, and she intended to honor that. Instead, she said, "I brought something." She reached into the pocket of her nightgown and withdrew a strip of dark fabric. Silk, soft and cool to the touch. "A blindfold," she explained. "For you. So you won't accidentally see me if my shroud shifts." Varric stared at the fabric in her hand. His expression flickered through several emotions too quickly for her to read. "You brought a blindfold," he repeated slowly, "to protect me. From you." "Yes." "You're not concerned about being vulnerable? Being with a man you barely know, a man who can't see you in a dark room?" Revna almost laughed. "My lord, you've already shown me more kindness than anyone in my life. The warm room, the heated floors, the kiss that asked nothing of me." She held out the blindfold. "The least I can do is make sure you're protected in return." For a long moment, Varric simply looked at her. Then slowly he crossed the room and took the blindfold from her hand. "Turn around," he said quietly. Revna obeyed. She felt him move behind her, felt the displacement of air as he raised his hands. Then the soft pressure of silk against her fingers as he guided them to tie the blindfold around his own eyes. "You're tying it yourself," she said, confused. "I'm teaching you how I prefer it." His voice was close to her ear now. "So that next time, you can do it. Next time." The words sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. The last candle was extinguished. Complete darkness fell. In the blackness, Revna was hyper-aware of everything. The crackle of the fire, the rustle of fabric as Varric moved, the sound of her own heart, beating too fast. "I can hear your fear," he said quietly. "Your pulse is racing." "I'm not afraid of you." "Then what are you afraid of?" She considered the question. "I'm afraid of disappointing you, of being inadequate, of confirming every terrible thing you've heard about Veilborn women." His laugh was soft, unexpected. "I've heard that Veilborn women are death incarnate, that your touch withers crops and your gaze stops hearts, that being in your presence is like standing beside an open grave." A pause. "So far, you've been the least terrifying person I've encountered in years." Despite everything, Revna smiled beneath her shroud. "That's not quite the reassurance I expected." "I'm not good at reassurance." She felt his hands find her shoulders, resting there lightly. His touch was cold, but somehow not unpleasant. "I'm not good at most things that involve other people." "Then we have something in common." His thumbs traced small circles against her shoulders, soothing, patient, as if he had all the time in the world. "I'm going to remove your shroud now," he said. "Is that acceptable?" Revna's breath caught. You can't see me anyway. No, but I'd like to touch you. And the fabric is in the way. The way he said it, so direct, so matter-of-fact, made heat pool in her belly. She nodded, then remembered he couldn't see her. Yes, she whispered. That's acceptable. His fingers found the clasps at her throat. He undid them slowly, carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. The heavy fabric slid from her shoulders, pooling at her feet. For the first time in years, Revna stood without her shroud. The air felt strange against her face, cool and fresh and terrifying. Even though no one could see her, even though the room was pitch black, she felt exposed in a way she never had before. Breathe, Varric murmured. Just breathe. She forced herself to exhale. His hands returned to her shoulders, then slid slowly down her arms. His touch was gentle, exploratory, not demanding, just learning. You're so warm, he said, wonder in his voice. I'd forgotten what warmth felt like. Is that why you chose me? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Because Veilborn are supposed to bring death? Because you thought you were safe with me? His hand stilled on her wrists. Yes. And are you? Safe? A long pause. I don't know anymore. His mouth found hers in the darkness. The kiss was nothing like the formal press of lips against her knuckles at the ceremony. This was heat and need and something desperate, as if he was drowning and she was air. His lips were warm, so warm, and when his tongue traced the seam of her mouth, she opened for him without thinking. The cold of his hands against her back, the warmth of his mouth against hers. The contrast made her gasp, made her press closer, made her want things she didn't have words for. They moved together through the darkness, finding the bed, finding each other. Every touch a question, every response an answer. And when they finally joined, when she felt the full weight of him above her and inside her, Revna understood something with devastating clarity. She could fall in love with this man. This cold, broken, impossible man who had chosen her because he thought she was safe. She could love him, and loving him would destroy them both. The weeks that followed were nothing like Revna expected. She had anticipated cold formality, brief encounters in the dark, a husband who wanted nothing to do with her beyond the production of heirs. Instead, she found herself looking forward to evening. Varric came to her chambers every night. Not because he had to. The contract only required consummation, not continuation. But he came anyway, appearing at her door as the sun set, staying until the fire burned low. At first, they barely spoke. The darkness was for other things. But slowly, gradually, words crept in. Tell me about the Northern Reach, she asked one night, her head resting on his chest. His skin was cold against her cheek, but she'd grown used to it, almost fond of it. What do you want to know? Everything. I've never been this far north before. The people, the customs, the history, whatever you're willing to share. He was silent for a long moment. Then he began to speak. He told her about the ancient wars that had shaped his territory, about the harsh winters that killed the weak and forged the strong, about his grandmother, the legendary warrior queen who had defended these lands against 3 simultaneous invasions, and won. She sounds remarkable, Revna said. She was. His voice softened slightly. She used to say that the North doesn't break people. It reveals them, shows them who they truly are when everything else is stripped away. What did the North reveal about you? Another long silence. This one stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. That I'm more monster than man, he said finally, and that the monster is winning. Revna wanted to argue, to tell him that monsters didn't warm rooms for nervous brides or ask permission before touching or teach kindness through small gestures. But she'd promised not to ask about his condition, so she simply pressed closer, sharing what warmth she could. The days took on a rhythm. Mornings, she explored the keep with her blind maids, learning its twisting corridors and hidden courtyards. Afternoons, she read in the library, a vast room filled with books on subjects her father had never allowed her to study. And evenings. Evenings belonged to him. She started noticing things, small details that built into a larger, more troubling picture. The shadows in the corners of rooms moved when Varric was present. Not dramatically, not in ways that anyone else seemed to notice, but Revna had spent her life watching from behind a veil. She saw what others missed. The shadows moved toward him, reached for him, as if they were hungry. She noticed the way he flinched from bright light, turning away from windows during sunny days, the way his skin grew colder after particularly long meetings with his advisors, the way exhaustion carved deeper lines around his eyes with each passing week. Something was draining him, consuming him from within. But when she tried to ask, he deflected. "It's nothing. Just fatigue. You worry too much." She didn't believe him, but she also didn't know how to help without breaking her promise. One night, roughly a month after their wedding, Varric arrived at her chambers earlier than usual. The sun had barely set, golden light still streaming through the narrow windows. "You're early," Revna said, surprised. "I had a difficult day." He crossed to the fire and stood before it, his back to her. "Negotiations with the eastern provinces. They want more than we can give." "Tell me about it." He glanced over his shoulder. "You want to hear about trade disputes?" "I want to hear about whatever is troubling you." Again, that flicker of surprise in his pale eyes, as if kindness was a foreign language he kept forgetting she spoke. So he told her. About the Eastern lords and their demands. About the balance of power that kept the Northern Reach safe. About the compromises he'd made and the ones he'd refused. Revna listened carefully, and when he'd finished, she said, "What if you offered them access to the northern timber routes instead? The eastern provinces are building a new fleet. They need wood more than grain." Varric turned to face her fully. "How do you know about the eastern fleet?" "I read. Your library has extensive records of regional shipping patterns." She paused. "Was that wrong? Should I not have accessed those documents?" "No, I—" He stopped, his expression strange. "No one has ever asked about my work before. My advisors give reports. My commanders follow orders. But no one asks." "Then they're fools." The words came out fiercer than she intended. "You carry the weight of an entire territory on your shoulders. The least someone could do is listen." Something shifted in his face. The cold mask cracked, just slightly, revealing something raw underneath. He crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed her. This kiss was different from the others. Those had been careful, controlled, even in their passion. This was desperate. His cold hands gripped her face, tilting her head back. His mouth demanded rather than asked. Revna responded in kind. She'd spent weeks learning his body in the darkness. Now she used that knowledge, touching him in places that made him groan, kissing him in ways that made him forget to be cold. They didn't make it to the bed. The wall served just as well. Afterward, tangled together on the floor before the fire, Varric said something that changed everything. "Stay." Revna blinked. "I am staying. This is my chamber." "No, I mean—" He paused as if struggling with words that didn't come easily. "Tomorrow. Stay with me. Not just at night. During the day. Come to my meetings. Eat meals with me. I want—" Another pause, longer this time. "I want to know you. Not just your body. You." Revna's heart stopped. This wasn't part of their agreement. He'd been explicit. They would not share a life, would not share meals, and would not spend time together beyond what was necessary. "You said you wanted nothing to do with me," she whispered. "Beyond producing heirs." "I was wrong." The admission seemed to cost him something. I thought I could keep you at a distance. I thought if I never truly knew you, I would be safe. His hand found hers, cold fingers intertwining with warm. But it's too late for that. Varric? I'm not asking for love. His voice was sharp, almost desperate. That's still impossible. That can never happen. But this, what we have, I don't want it to end when you conceive. I want more. Revna should have said no. She should have reminded him of his own terms, his own warnings. Kept the walls high and the expectations low. Instead, she said, yes. From that day forward, everything changed. She attended his morning briefings, sitting quietly in the corner at first, then gradually offering observations and suggestions. His advisors looked at her with suspicion initially, but when her suggestion about the timber routes resolved the Eastern dispute, their suspicion transformed into something closer to respect. She ate breakfast with him in his private study, lunch in the great hall, dinner in her chambers, then his, then hers again. They talked about everything: politics and poetry, history and hopes, the small details of daily life and the large questions about purpose and meaning. She learned that he couldn't bear the taste of honey because his mother used to give it to him as medicine when he was ill, that he secretly loved terrible romantic ballads, but would deny it until his dying breath, that he'd once wanted to be a scholar, not a soldier, before duty demanded otherwise, and he learned about her, about the isolation of her childhood, about the deaths that had marked her as cursed, about the sister she'd lost and the father she wished she could forget. He was wrong about you, Varric said one night, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Your father. Everyone who called you poison. You don't know that. I know that I've spent more time with you than anyone in years, and I'm still here. Maybe my curse doesn't work on people who are already dying. She meant it as a dark joke, but Varric's hand stilled on her skin. Maybe, he said quietly, or maybe your curse isn't real at all. Before she could respond, he kissed her again, and she let herself forget, for just a moment, that this couldn't last, that loving him would kill them both. The signs grew harder to ignore. His skin was colder every week. The shadows followed him more openly now, trailing behind him like a cloak when he walked through dim corridors. She woke some nights to find him shivering beside her, frost actually forming on his eyelashes, his breath misting in the warm air of her chamber. She built the fires higher, added more blankets, started sleeping pressed against him, sharing every ounce of warmth she possessed. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Tell me what's wrong with you, she begged one night. Please. I know I promised not to ask, but I can see you fading. I can feel it. You can't help me. His voice was gentle but final. No one can. Let me try. Revna. He cupped her face in his icy hands. Trying would kill you, and I won't let that happen. She wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him understand that watching him die slowly was killing her anyway. But all she could do was hold him and wait for the darkness to take him. 3 months after their wedding, she woke with a familiar nausea rolling through her stomach. The healer confirmed it that afternoon. She was pregnant. Revna sat in her chamber for hours, one hand pressed against her still flat belly, trying to decide how to feel. She should be happy. This was what their contract required. This was the entire point of their marriage. But all she could think about was Varric's pale face, the frost on his skin, the shadows reaching for him like hungry ghosts. She was carrying his child, and she might have to raise it alone. That night, when he came to her chambers, she told him, I'm pregnant. Varric went very still. His hand found her stomach in the darkness, resting there with impossible gentleness. You're certain? The healer confirmed it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Varric made a sound she'd never heard from him before. A laugh, raw and broken and full of wonder. "A child," he breathed. "Our child." "Are you happy?" she asked. "Happy." He repeated the word as if tasting it. "Yes. Yes. I think I am. I didn't know I could still feel this way." He pulled her close, his cold arms wrapped around her, his face buried in her hair. She felt wetness against her scalp and realized with shock that he was crying. The shadow warlord was crying. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for this gift." Revna held him as he wept, and she made a decision. She would not let him die. Whatever his curse was, whatever was consuming him, she would find a way to stop it, even if it killed her. The collapse came 3 days later. Revna was in the library researching everything she could find about ancient curses and shadow magic when she heard the shouting. Servants running, guards calling for the healer. She knew before anyone told her. By the time she reached his chambers, Varric was unconscious on the floor. His skin had gone translucent, blue veins visible beneath the surface like rivers beneath ice. Frost crept across his chest, spreading outward from his heart in crystalline patterns. And the shadows. Gods. The shadows. They weren't just following him anymore. They were attached to him, thick tendrils of darkness that pulsed with their own terrible life. They wrapped around his arms, his legs, his throat, as if trying to pull him down into some void only they could see. "Everyone out," Revna commanded. Her voice didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. The servants fled. The healer hesitated. I set out. When they were alone, Revna knelt beside her husband and pulled his head into her lap. His skin was so cold it burned. The frost on his chest crept higher, reaching for his throat. "Varric." She stroked his hair with trembling fingers. "Please, wake up. Tell me what's happening." His eyes fluttered open, those pale eyes that had seemed so cold when she first met him. They were warm now, she realized, full of something that looked terrifyingly like love. "It's too late," he whispered. "The bargain is claiming me." "What bargain? Tell me. You've kept this secret long enough." For a moment she thought he would refuse. Then his hand found hers, his grip weak but desperate. "Generations ago," he said, his breath misting in the warm air, "my ancestor wanted power, wanted to protect his lands, his people. So he sought out the shadow realm and made a bargain with the creatures there." Revna listened, her heart pounding. They gave him strength, speed, the ability to command fear itself. In exchange, his voice broke. In exchange, they would claim the eldest son of each generation. Slowly, over decades, until nothing remained but shadow. "That's why you're so cold, why the shadows follow you." "They're not following me. They're consuming me." His laugh was bitter, broken. "I thought I could outrun it. If I never felt love, never formed attachments, the process would slow. I could live a full life, or close to it, before the darkness took me completely." Understanding crashed over Revna like a wave. "That's why you chose me, a Veilborn. Someone you thought you could never love." "Yes." Tears tracked down his frozen cheeks. "But I was wrong. I loved you anyway. I loved you from the moment you offered me that blindfold, caring about my safety when no one else ever had." "Don't say that." Her own tears fell onto his face. "Don't you dare say goodbye." "I have to." The confession, the love, it accelerated everything. "The shadows are claiming me now. By morning, I'll be gone." "No." Revna gripped his face between her hands. "No. There has to be a way. Every curse can be broken. This one can't. My family has tried for generations. We've consulted witches, scholars, priests. Nothing works." "What about the shadow creatures themselves? Can the bargain be renegotiated?" Varric's eyes widened slightly. No one can enter the shadow realm. It would kill any normal person. I'm not normal. The words came out before she could stop them. I'm Veilborn. What if that means something more than bringing death? Revna. What if I could enter that realm? What if I could negotiate with them? You can't. His grip tightened on her hand. I won't let you. If the shadows touched you, if they consumed you instead of me, then tell me another way. Her voice cracked. Tell me how to save you, and I'll do it. Anything. Everything. But he had no other way. No answers. No hope. The frost reached his jaw. His breathing grew shallow. Revna made her decision. I'm going to find a way, she said. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to save you. Don't. His voice was barely audible now. Don't risk yourself. Don't risk our child. Our child deserves a father. She pressed her lips to his frozen forehead. And I deserve more than a few months of happiness before losing you. His eyes fluttered closed. The shadows pulsed around him, hungry and patient. Revna stood. Her legs were unsteady, but her resolve was iron. She needed answers. And she knew exactly where to find them. The messenger rode through the night. By the next morning, Revna stood in the great hall of the Northern Reach, waiting. She'd sent for the one person who knew more about Veilborn than anyone else. The one person who had spent her entire life trying to destroy her. Lord Aldrich Thornwood arrived with armed guards, as if expecting an ambush. His silver hair was immaculate, his noble bearing unchanged. But there was something different in his eyes when he looked at her. Fear. You summoned me, he said coldly, against all courtesy and protocol. Courtesy died when you tried to sell me to the Silent Sisters. Revna stood before him without her shroud, her face exposed. Let him look. Let him see what he'd tried so hard to hide. I need information. About what? About what I really am? Lord Aldrich's face went carefully blank. You're a Veilborn, a curse upon our family. There's nothing more to know. You're lying. Revna stepped closer. You've always known more than you told me, more than you told anyone. I don't know what you're talking about. My mother. The words cut through the hall like a blade. She died in childbirth. That's what you told everyone. But she didn't, did she? For just a moment, Lord Aldrich's composure cracked. She was Veilborn too, Revna continued. That's where I got it from. Not from some curse or random misfortune, from her. From her bloodline. Stop. And you couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand being married to something you considered an abomination. So you had her killed. I said stop. Did you smother her while she was weak from labor? Poison her while she nursed me? Or did you pay someone else to do it? The way you've paid people to clean up all your messes. Lord Aldrich's hand cracked across her face. The slap echoed through the hall. Revna tasted blood, but she smiled. There it is, she said quietly. The truth you've been hiding for 23 years. You know nothing, her father hissed. Then tell me. Tell me what Veilborn really are. Tell me why you were so afraid of my mother. Tell me why you've spent my entire life trying to make me hate myself. Because you're monsters. His voice rose, decades of suppressed rage spilling out. Your mother was a monster, her mother before her, creatures that walk between worlds that speak to shadows that possess powers no human should have. Revna's heart stopped. Walk between worlds, speak to shadows. We're not deathbringers, she breathed. We're shadow walkers. Lord Aldrich's face twisted. So she told you, before she died. I always wondered. She didn't tell me anything. I'm figuring it out now. Revna stepped closer, ignoring the guards who moved to protect her father. The deaths around me, the nursemaid, Corvin. They weren't killed by my curse, were they? Silence. Were they? They were necessary. Her father's voice was flat. Your nursemaid was filling your head with stories about your mother, about your heritage. I couldn't allow that. Revna felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. And Corvin? He was going to take you away, marry you, move you to his family's estate, where I couldn't control you anymore. Lord Aldrich smiled, and it was the coldest thing Revna had ever seen. The poison was untraceable, and the timing, right before the wedding, made it so easy to blame you. You murdered an innocent man. Her voice shook. You murdered his entire family. I protected mine. He leaned closer. From the abomination my wife birthed, from the creature wearing my daughter's face. A new voice cut through the hall. Father, stop. Odette stood in the doorway, her face white as snow. Odette? Lord Aldrich turned, his expression shifting to something gentler. This doesn't concern you? I heard everything. Odette's voice trembled. You killed Corvin. You killed his family. You let Revna believe she was cursed for years. It was necessary. You killed our mother? Silence fell like a hammer. Odette walked forward, each step deliberate. I was 4 years old when she died. I barely remember her. But I remember you telling me she died because of Revna, that the birth killed her. Tears streamed down her face. You lied. About everything. I protected you. You tortured my sister. Odette's voice cracked. You made her believe she was poison. You isolated her, manipulated her, and tried to destroy her. And I helped you because I believed your lies. She turned to Revna, her expression breaking. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Revna wanted to respond, wanted to comfort her sister, to tell her it wasn't her fault. But there was no time. I need to know how to enter the shadow realm, she said to her father. You know, don't you? You knew what my mother was. You knew what I could do. Tell me how. Lord Aldrich laughed. Why would I help you? Go ahead and let your warlord husband die. Let the shadows take him. It's what monsters like him deserve. If you won't tell me, Revna said quietly, I'll find another way. And when I do, I'll make sure every lord in every kingdom knows what you did. The murders, the lies, everything. Her father's smile faded. I'll send guards back with Odette. She'll search your estate until she finds whatever records you kept about my mother, whatever texts or artifacts you hid away. You wouldn't dare. I'm the Lady of the Northern Reach. Revna lifted her chin. I dare whatever I please. For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other. Then Lord Aldrich's shoulders slumped. Your mother had a mirror, he said quietly. An heirloom from her family. She used it to enter the shadow realm. I hid it after her death. Couldn't bring myself to destroy it. Where? The vault beneath the eastern tower of our estate, hidden behind the false wall in my study. His voice was hollow now, empty. But it won't matter. The shadow creatures don't negotiate. They only consume. We'll see about that. Revna turned to her sister. Odette. Can you retrieve it for me? Odette nodded, wiping her tears. I'll ride today. I'll bring it back as fast as I can. Thank you. Revna looked at her father one last time. This man who had stolen her mother, stolen her peace, stolen her entire sense of self. When this is over, she said, you'll answer for what you've done. Then she walked out of the hall, leaving him standing alone with his guards and his guilt. She had a husband to save. The mirror arrived 2 days later. Odette had ridden through 2 nights without rest, pushing her horse to its limits. She arrived at the northern reach, filthy, exhausted, and clutching a wrapped bundle against her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. Perhaps it was. The mirror was old, ancient. Its frame was carved from wood so dark it looked like solidified shadow, and the glass itself seemed to ripple like water when Revna looked at it directly. How does it work? She asked. I don't know. Odette shook her head. There were no instructions. Just the mirror. and a note in Mother's handwriting. Revna took the yellowed paper with trembling hands. The handwriting was elegant, careful. Words written by a woman who knew she might not survive to speak them aloud. "My darling daughter," she read aloud, "if you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have discovered what we are. We are not cursed, we are blessed. We walk between light and shadow, serving as bridges between realms. The mirror is our doorway. To use it, simply look into the glass and speak the words, 'I am shadow. I am light. I am the walker between.'" Revna's throat tightened. "Be careful, my love. The shadow realm is dangerous for those who don't understand it. But you are stronger than you know. You carry the gift of our ancestors, the ability to negotiate with darkness itself. Use it wisely, and know that I have always loved you, even if I couldn't stay to show you." The letter was signed with a single word. Mother. Revna pressed the paper to her heart. "I'll stay with Lord Varek," Odette said softly. "Keep watch over him while you do whatever you need to do." "Thank you." Revna embraced her sister, perhaps for the first time since they were children. "For everything. Just come back," Odette whispered. "Please. I just found my sister again. I can't lose you." "I'll come back. I promise." Revna took the mirror to her chambers and locked the door. Varek lay on the bed, barely breathing. The frost had consumed his entire torso now. The shadows wrapped around him like a cocoon, pulsing with patient hunger. He looked like a man already dead, preserved in ice. But his heart still beat. Faint and slow, but present. "I'm going to save you," Revna whispered. "Hold on for me. Just a little longer." She positioned the mirror on the table and sat before it. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and frightened and determined. She took a breath. "I am shadow. I am light. I am the walker between." The mirror's surface rippled, the reflection distorted. And then the glass seemed to open, becoming not a surface but a doorway, a passage into somewhere else. Revna stepped through. The shadow realm was nothing like she expected. She had imagined darkness, cold, emptiness. Instead, she found herself in a world of twilight where everything existed in shades of gray. The sky was neither day nor night, but something in between. The ground beneath her feet was solid but yielded slightly with each step, like walking on packed ash. And the creatures. They emerged from the half-light like dreams taking form. Not monsters, not the terrifying beasts she had imagined. They were beautiful in their strangeness, figures made of smoke and starlight, with eyes like distant galaxies. Shadow Walker. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "We have waited so long." Revna forced herself to stand tall. "You know what I am? We know what you were meant to be, what your mother was, what her mother was before her." The nearest creature drifted closer, its form shifting constantly. "We have called to your bloodline for generations, but none would answer." "You called to us? We are trapped." The creature's voice was mournful. "Bound by an ancient bargain we never wished to make. Your husband's ancestor forced us into a contract. We gave power in exchange for freedom. But he twisted the terms. Instead of freeing us after a single generation, he bound us to consume his heirs forever." Understanding dawned. "You don't want to consume Varek. We want to be free." The creature's form solidified slightly, becoming almost human in shape. "The bargain was never meant to last this long. We have been prisoners for centuries, forced to slowly drain the life from innocent men simply because their ancestor was a fool and a cheater. Then break the bargain. We cannot. The terms were sealed with magic beyond our power to undo." The creature moved closer still. "But you are a shadow walker. You exist in both realms. You could renegotiate, Rewrite the terms. Set us free and save your husband in the same act. What would the new terms be? Simple. We release the claim on his bloodline. Every son, present and future, goes free. In exchange, the creature paused. In exchange, you grant us passage. Passage to where? Beyond. We were travelers once, before the bargain trapped us here. We wish to continue our journey through the realms of existence. Let us pass through the mortal world freely, harming no one, and we will release our claim forever. Revna considered this. How do I know you'll keep your word? Because unlike humans, the creature said, we cannot lie. Our words are binding. If we promise to release the claim and cause no harm, we are incapable of breaking that promise. She looked into those galaxy eyes and saw only truth. Then I agree. I grant you free passage through the mortal realm, bound by your promise to harm no living creature. In exchange, you release all claims on the bloodline of the Northern Reach, present and future. The creature bowed its shifting head. The bargain is remade. The Shadow Walker has spoken. Light flared around them, brilliant and blinding. Revna felt something shift in the fabric of reality itself. Ancient chains shattering, old debts being cleared. And then, she was falling. She woke on the floor of her chamber, gasping. The mirror lay beside her, its surface now ordinary glass. The magic was spent. From the bed, she heard a sound that made her heart stop. Coughing. Revna scrambled to her feet and ran to Varek's side. The frost was melting. Water ran down his chest, soaking the sheets. The shadows were retreating, pulling away from his body like morning mist burned off by the sun. And his eyes, those beautiful, pale eyes, were open. Revna. His voice was hoarse, weak, but unmistakably alive. I'm here. She grabbed his hand. It was still cool, but warming. I'm here. You're going to be all right. What happened? He struggled to sit up. The shadows, they were consuming me. I could feel myself disappearing. And then, I broke the bargain. She laughed through her tears. I walked into the shadow realm and negotiated with the creatures there. They never wanted to hurt you. They were trapped, just like your family. So I set them free in exchange for setting you free. Varric stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. You entered the shadow realm, alone, while pregnant. Yes. You negotiated with ancient creatures of darkness. Yes. And you won. Revna smiled. I'm very persuasive. For a long moment, Varric was silent. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You impossible woman, he murmured against her hair. You magnificent, terrifying, impossible woman. I love you too. He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands that were warming by the moment. You love me? I've loved you for months. I was just afraid to say it. She pressed her forehead to his. I'm not afraid anymore. Neither am I. He kissed her, deep and desperate and full of wonder. I love you, Revna. I love you. And I'm not going to die. Because of you. 3 months later, Revna stood in the garden of the Northern Reach, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Her belly had grown round with their child. The healers said it would be a girl. Varric insisted on the name Celeste, after the stars that had guided Revna through the shadow realm. Revna thought it was perfect. So much had changed since that day she stepped through the mirror. Lord Aldrich Thornwood sat in a cell beneath the Justice Hall of the capital, awaiting trial for murder. Odette had testified against him, as had a dozen servants who had witnessed his cruelty over the years. He would spend the rest of his life paying for what he'd done. Odette had moved to the Northern Reach, taking up residence in a cottage near the keep. She and Revna were still learning to be sisters again, unpacking years of lies and manipulation. It wasn't easy, but it was getting better. And Varric was transformed. The cold had left him completely. His skin was warm now, his eyes bright, and his laughter frequent and genuine. Without the shadow's constant drain, he had energy she'd never seen in him before. He smiled more, laughed more, touched her constantly, as if making up for all the years he'd held himself apart. There you are. His arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. I've been looking for you. I'm watching the sunset. You're always watching sunsets now? He pressed a kiss to her temple. I think you're making up for years of hiding in shadows. Maybe I am. She leaned back against him, safe in his warmth. Is that so wrong? Nothing about you is wrong. His hands settled on her belly, feeling the baby kick. You saved me, Revna. You saved our entire bloodline. Our daughter will never know what it feels like to be consumed by darkness. Neither will any child born to your family ever again. She turned in his arms, facing him. The curse is broken. Completely. Because of you. Because of us. She rose on her toes to kiss him. We saved each other. You gave me a home when I thought I would never belong anywhere. You looked at my shame and loved me more for it. You walked between worlds for me. His voice was rough with emotion. You faced ancient creatures and negotiated my freedom. I can never repay that. You can love me. She smiled. That's payment enough. He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper. When they finally broke apart, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Come inside, Varric said. Dinner is waiting. Odette is telling embarrassing stories about your childhood. She doesn't know any embarrassing stories. Father kept us apart. She's making them up. His grin was wicked. They're very creative. Revna laughed, the sound bright and free. A year ago, she had stood at an offering, certain no one would choose her. Certain she was poison, cursed, unworthy of love. Now she stood in a garden with the man she loved, carrying their child, surrounded by family she had chosen and family who had chosen her back. The Veilborn curse had turned out to be a gift. The shadow warlord had turned out to be the kindest man she'd ever known. And love, the thing they had both been so certain would destroy them, had saved them instead. I love you, she said. I love you too. Varric took her hand. Always. They walked inside together, leaving the shadows behind.